Well, so what you can see on the screen now is just two of the latest examples. And I mean, I could spend the best part of an hour pulling up umpteen examples that I've seen in the last week or so, similar in nature, whether it's actual adults promoting what you can see on the screen, or if it's just Twitter accounts, organisations promoting what you can see on the screen. There's always somebody somewhere promoting what you can see on the screen. And whether or not it's Twitter, it's YouTube as well. There's YouTube channels dedicated to this. Um, and it's something that I've noticed for some time, something I've made videos on here and there in the past, and that is obviously the UNCRC and all of the ramifications that come with it. It's quite ironic in many respects how they classify it as children's rights. You know, every child is entitled to this charter being enshrined in Scots law. And yet, I had a childhood free of this nonsense, and the generations that came before me had a childhood free of this nonsense. They had the childhood that every child is has a right to have. Yet along comes talk of the UNCRC, even before it's actually enshrined into Scottish law, and all of a sudden, the childhoods that children should be experiencing are tainted and interfered with and politicised to a certain extent as social justice escapades become more and more of a prominent feature in their lives. False sense of empowerment, grooming, whatever you will. So the two tweets that I've got highlighted here from the Children's Parliament, and initially I'd come across them because whack jobs were promoting it. I mean, it says a lot about adults who have got a career in promoting this shit for children, and I don't know what goes through their heads. Obviously, they're activists. They're living their life with a sort of blinkered worldview. They don't really see the ramifications, the malevolent undertones that are at play here. They just believe that this is the best thing since sliced bread. It's progressive, it's bold, it's brave, it's all the rest of that shit. But by and large, it's become ever more apparent ever since the mere discussions began of implementing this into Scots law. It's a red herring. It's been an execution day dot to politicise children, and the proof's in the pudding, as you can see already, when you've got little children who classify themselves as human rights defenders, and ironically, and demand action, demand change, spend more and more of their time participating in investigation, shall we say, as I'm pretty sure I've got something in one of the tabs pertaining to that. But and you've got little 5, 6, 7-year old climatologists, experts in all things social justice, but yet they're pretty illiterate when it comes to their ABCs and whatnot. The standards in Scotland plummet. But it says there, some fabulous members of the Children's Parliament receiving the amazing Climate Change Makers Impact Report, which you can find online. And then they've got the link to that, which I haven't pretty sure gone over before, at least in part. Nonetheless, well worth a read to find out more about realising children's rights in the context of climate action and deliberative democracy. The second one, obviously, below, says, if I can get to it, sorry. This one really irritated me. Our marvellous team of children's human rights defenders have been meeting weekly in the run-up to our meeting with the Scottish Government's executive team, and this week made some clay artwork to show the DGs of Scotland where the calls to action are a reality, with some added aliens. Oh, that's great. Fantastic stuff. But it's the fact that it states here, yet again, that there's a group of children who have been politicised to a certain extent, hence the calls for action, branded as human rights defenders, and they're going to be having a meeting at some point. They ran up to our meeting with the Scottish Government's executive team. Now, I've gone over this before, I've showed videos of it before, where at least once a year, members of the Children's Parliament, who are politicised children, who have been introduced to all the social justice talking points of the day from a very young age, they meet with members of the Scottish Government, and they all agree upon, before meeting the Scottish Government members, including Thin Lips and Baldy Swinney, etc., they agree upon several different talking points, things that they wish to see implemented, or things that are important to them that they wish to see. They want to see change. So the last time that they met, if I recall correctly, they wanted to eradicate gender inequality in schools. And one of the things that they put forth and suggested for the Scottish Government to consider was eradicating gender stereotypes. And this conveniently all came out round about the same time as the groundbreaking report from the feminist Helena Kennedy. Now, where did these children come up with the idea in the first place that gender inequality was a problem in schools? And furthermore, where did they then come up with the idea amongst themselves that one of the ways that they could achieve gender equality was to eradicate those toxic, pesky gender stereotypes? It's very strange that these children, in their attempts to suggest methods that could be put forth to eradicate gender inequality, came up with the exact same fucking talking points that feminists come up with. So again, it's just yet another example of politicising children from a very young age, brainwashing them, indoctrinating them, propagandising them, then blowing smoke up their fucking arse by telling them that they have a right to be listened to and taken seriously. Then that's put into motion as they have little meetings with the government, and in turn the government sit there, nod their head, pretend that they're taking everything on board, but it's been said, and they'll consider it when it comes to the next round of policy making. You know? And so we're having another meeting soon with the government. I tried to find a bit more in regards to what this meeting was going to be about, and if there is information out there, admittedly I couldn't find it, but that's not really the point. The point is that this is still an ongoing process. So which leads me to this creepy bastard, Bruce Adamson. Man that I've made a few videos on in the past. I was first introduced to him, don't know, maybe a year ago. No, it must have been 2020. Around about 2020. The first video that I made on him was a video titled something to do with Agenda 21. If you go onto my channel, if you were interested, and you type in Agenda 21 in the search bit, you'll find the video in question. I was first introduced to this man, and my initial impression of him is an impression I still have to this day, that he's a creepy bastard. He's a very bizarre man. The way that he seems to emphatically advocate for the UNCRC to be implemented into Scots law as soon as possible, and the way that he goes on and on about children's rights, it's borderline creepy. Wouldn't go as far as to imply that he's a nonce. First and foremost, don't want sued, but second of all, I don't know if I'd go that far anyway, but it's fucking weird anyway. Nonetheless, I'll give you a couple of examples as to why he's a weirdo. This was an article from April the 26th on 2022, and I might as well add as well, I'm not entirely sure if the UNCRC has actually been enshrined in Scots law as of yet. I might very well find out as this video progresses, but I know that it's something that they are planning very soon. It's not really a matter of will it be next year or the year after, it's probably will it be in the next couple of months if it's not already implemented. But they don't really need to enshrine it into law anyway, because even the mere discussion of it for the last few years has been enough to justify everything that we've seen so far. Anyway, this ballbag says here that we must tell our young people to stand tall, be brave, think big and believe. Oh, that's so great, so great. But he says down here that sorry, this week the Children and Young People's Commissioner office turns 18, and we championed children's rights for the equivalent of an entire childhood. But yet we still have much more to do. The law creating our office was a collective endeavour across the political spectrum. Scotland's first independent human rights institution, founded on UN principles, but yet on the website that Bruce Adamson runs, or is the figurehead for, they insist, or they used to anyway, they insist that they're independent. You know? Nobody pulls their strings. No, but it's founded on UN principles. It's not funny. Anyway, independent from government, with legal authority to hold those in power to account. Independent from government, ours. The government, essentially in Scotland, is founded on UN principles. So, what's the fucking difference? Anyway, we've had 3 commissioners nominated by the Parliament and appointed by the Queen. Professor Kathleen Marshall and Tom Bailey. And I started in 2017. 2017. So great. We've had Bruce for all these years. From day one, Kathleen fought to give children's rights and voices a place in the heart of law, policy and practice. And as a founding member of Kathleen's staff, I was inspired by her commitments and expertise. Yeah, it was Around about this period, I assume that the you were inspired by that inspiration quickly turned into something more creepy, if you ask me. Honestly, I might even pull up a video just to show you what I'm talking about this guy. He gives me the book. He's a weirdo. Anyway, it's down here where he goes on to say that when I was appointed, children told me they wanted someone who would be friendly and caring when working with them, but fierce, fucking fierce. Okay, when holding those in power to account. We don't just speak up for children, we empower children, which kind of amounts to nothing short of politicising them, by and large, to claim their rights. And one of the rights from the UNCRC is actually that children have a right to learn their rights. So again, it's a red herring. From day dots, it's all about the rights, children's rights, we empower them to claim their rights. Oh, fucking hell. Thank God that Bruce Adamson was gifted to the people of Scotland, the youth of Scotland. I don't know how they would cope without Bruce Adamson's fucking... Oh, Jesus Christ, man. We see this strongly through activism on issues like climate change. And again, kind of goes back to the tweets that I showed about 5 minutes ago. Where would children have the know-how to talk about climate change, let alone go out and advocate for change or push for change, protest for change on climate change? It's one thing to know that climate change is a thing because it's everywhere you look, whether it's politicians talking about it or the media, etc. But it's a different matter entirely to start taking it upon yourself to classify yourself as a fucking activist or start campaigning for imminent change, action, etc. And then, of course, when you start to go down that route, you get the likes of Bruce Adamson and Nicola Sturgeon and the rest of the dickheads that make up the Scottish Parliament, brandishing you as a human rights defender or a climate change maker. Again, blowing smoke up your arse, false sense of empowerment, deriving from nothing short of politicising, propagandising, grooming. Anyway, children in Scotland have always played an important role in our communities. Or have they? Well, when I was a child, I'm not entirely sure that was a correct statement, to be honest. We were just kids, left to our own devices to do as we pleased, and we were, as the expression goes, seen and not heard. And that was the way of the world. And fundamentally, that's the way that it should be. Children have a right to a childhood. Children have a right to a childhood devoid of interference, no likes of Bruce Adamson and the United Nations and UNESCO and the WHO and the SNP. But no, they need to know about the rights, because it's the right to know about the rights. And you got the likes of Bruce Adamson there to ensure that you're empowered to learn all about your rights, because it's your rights, whether or not you actually would have agreed to that. You've got no choice. You're going to learn about your rights. And I've helped develop a new international standard on the need for education about rights. So they promote the concept, the idea to these children with little bits of information that currently are present in Scotland. There isn't an educational programme. There's not enough actually in the curriculum at present to promote and teach the concept of rights. Give enough information for the children to conclude themselves that, I've got an idea. We should be doing more to ensure that learning about our rights is included within the education system. Then Bruce Adamson will go, that's a great idea. He'll suggest it to the Parliament, or they'll get the children to suggest it to the Parliament when they're meeting with the executive team. And lo and behold, the government have to take what they say into consideration. They have a right to be listened to and taken seriously. Hey presto, you've got what you wanted. By and large, premeditation. Problem, reaction, solution springs to mind. Anyway, protection for children when they act to defend their rights. That identity as a human rights defender is important. Oh, it's important. Children's voices must be heard in all places of power. In 2019, 2 of our young advisors led a delegation who spoke to the UN Committee Against Torture in Geneva, the youngest ever to do so, where they challenged perceptions about the issues young people care about. International human rights shape what we do in Scotland. The UNCRC is at the heart of our work, but yet you're independent of government. It proclaims children's status as human beings with a distinct set of rights, like the right to an adequate standard of living, the highest attainable standard of health, and education, which develops them to their fullest potential. And again, it's a sweet, sweet irony coming into effect, because ever since the curriculum of excellence was implemented in Scotland, standards have plummeted. Then we could even go just to the last few years or so with the never-ending fucking lockdowns and forced mask wearing for children in schools. You know, you've completely destroyed not only the prospects of adolescents that would have relied on exam results to go on to further education, but you fucked up the early development of many of the young children in Scotland. Why? Because a twat with a bowl cut stood on a podium and dictated policy, and everybody had to follow and adhere to the rules. And if you weren't convinced by Nicola Thinlips, then they rolled out the homosexual dentist to dictate policy. You know, whether or not it was what was right, medically right, none of it was right in hindsight. Not that you needed to look at it through hindsight. Or via hindsight, I should say. Should have been common knowledge anyway. People were saying from the fucking beginning that none of the policies that would be put into place would have had any of the desired outcomes and effects. But nah, don't listen to that. But there's a plethora of things that I could point to that quite clearly indicates that the things that are being talked about here, not really taken that seriously either. Because by and large, the only thing that you hold dear to yourself, Brucey boy, same way that the SNP do, the same way that anybody that promotes the shit, it does. It's more about the propagandizing. It's more about ensuring that children know about the rights as opposed to living up to any of the fucking things that you proclaim you live by. You know, a standard of living. Why do we need a charter enshrined into Scottish law in order for a child to have a decent standard of living? You know, one of the rights is a right to play. Why do we need the United Nations to dictate whether or not, you know what I mean? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I must have been doing something wrong for my childhood. I must be thinking of something else. You know, my mind must be just fucking AWOL. You know, when I was out and about as a child doing what I was doing, you know, coming home with scuffed shoes, covered in shit. You know, I didn't even have a right to play. Fucking hell, anything could have happened. Thank God for Bruce Adamson and the United Nations to save the day for the generations of the future. Now that they go out confidently to play football if they're not glued to an Xbox, knowing that the United Nations have said that they have a right to play. Thank God for the United Nations, the socialists and the communists that make up the United Nations. Thank God for them. Anyway, it then says, as part of the 30th anniversary in 2019 for the UNCRC, we asked children to describe human rights in 7-word stories. And they said things like, my rights are my armour to me. My rights give me power, freedom and courage. Rights matter. You matter. Don't lose hope. This was 2019. So this was pre-Coof. Right? So this shit about hope and whatnot, don't know where that's coming from. But probably the climate change narrative. My mistake. But by and large, again, 2019, that was years ago. UNCRC was supposed to be enshrined into Scottish law, if I'm not mistaken. It was either last year or the year prior. But there was years leading up to them eventually agreeing in Parliament, which was part of a whole Parliament consensus. Every single party, they all agreed to enshrine it into Scottish law. You know, so much for opposition. But they all agreed. But I've watched videos, and one of the videos that I've made on this very subject, there's a video included within that video where they say that one of the reasons that they agreed to enshrine it into law is because of the great activism from children to push for it to become enshrined into law. So again, just like the climate change shit I was on about earlier, same thing's true when it comes to the UNCRC itself. They introduced the concept to the children, got the children to eventually and inevitably become fucking activists and argue for it to be enshrined into law, advocate for it to be included within educational resources, etc. And hey presto, the government, again, because they have a right to be listened to and taken seriously, oh, you've twisted my arm. Okay then, well, if you insist, if that's what you want. I know you're only 6 years old, but you know, if that's what you want, that's what we'll do. Fuck off, man. Anyway, it says here, according to Brucey Boy, you know, It will improve the lives of all children, but especially those whose rights are most at risk, including children living in poverty, disabled children, care experienced children, children of prisoners, young carers, and BAMEs. So again, so every group of children, bar your proverbial bog standard, according to these people, white kids. What makes BAME children any more special or in need of fucking protection from a charter courtesy of the United Nations? What makes them any more worthy of that protection in comparison to a white kid? You know, I'm getting fucking sick of this nonsense. Like, it does not matter where you look, the same thing is becoming more and more apparent. All this shit about equality, but yet everywhere you look, they're deliberately treating whites and BAMEs differently, proclaiming that they're trying to achieve equality, and in doing so, they're creating inequality. But that's the point, is it not? But anyway, there's something else there that I forgot to fucking touch on. Just this shit. I should have really... where it says, where was it? Where was it? Oh yeah, decisions made in the best interest. It starts with the idea that every child should grow up in a family environment of happiness, love, and understanding, and it says that governments must use all available resources to fulfil children's rights. I'm sure there was something else that I read there, but I can't find it now. It's late in the day. Like, give me a break. However, there was one more. I think there was one more part in this article. Then I'll go into the other one. That I just thought, this guy's a fucking creep. Oh yeah, here we go. It goes on to talk about 2020. Poverty has been one of the most significant human rights issues in Scotland throughout our 18 years, affecting every aspect of children's lives. We have helped secure increased support in Scotland with the other children's commissioners across the UK, having challenged the government's failures in social security, but there's more to be done at every level. It took until 2020 to finally change the law to protect children from assault by parents or carers as punishment. We are one of the last countries in Europe to do so. And again, though, you've given the state the ability to dictate what types of punishment are acceptable. That's by and large a decision that a parent should be able to take for themselves. And you've not exactly stamped out any abuse that's going to occur in households, have you? Because the same thing is true when they ramped up alcohol prices in Scotland. The only people that affected was casual drinkers, and the only people that you're in theory going to affect with a smacking ban is parents that might be quite tempted to smack their child from time to time. It's not going to stop people that smack their kid for no fucking reason or to be abusive or malevolent, etc. So, don't really know what you've stamped out there. Again, it's just eroding that sort of dynamic between parent and child, as they're obsessed with promoting the concept that there's no difference really between parent and child. They're human beings with rights, trying to sort of muscle their way in to become the parent of the child, creating discontent, if you will. And if you don't believe me, just look at what they tried to push forward with the named person scheme in Scotland, courtesy of the United Nations again. Go fucking figure. It's always the same in Scotland. But yeah, we're a progressive nation, and Nicholas Dunlop's the SNP. They're different. Are they? Fuck. Anyway, Scotland's low age of criminal responsibility and the continuing detention of children in prisons paints a bleak picture of our commitment to children's rights. The pace of change is unacceptably slow and the consequences of the government's delay are often tragic. Our mandate extends for care experienced children up to age 21, and our early work helps secure the independent care of you. A major part of our role is connecting Scotland to the international human rights community, working with bodies like the Council of Europe, the UN, and the Children's Commissioners globally to develop standards in children's rights and helping ensure they are implemented in Scotland. Why do we need any of these fucking concepts, courtesy of any of these entities, institutions? Why do we need them to be brought forward and brought into Scots law in order for children to function? Leave children to be children. That should be common sense. That should be the only right enshrined in any fucking Scots law, if you will. But no, of course not. We can't be having that, because the whole point of implementing this, talking about this, promoting this, and ensuring that this becomes part and parcel with childhood is so you can politicise children, is a blatant red herring. And then it goes on to say here, I rest my case essentially, this is essential. in addressing emerging global issues like the manufactured climate crisis, or climate justice actually, which is reparations, more or less, support for refugees, so-called refugees by and large, and a response to manufactured crises like the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Okay. Looking back at the last 18 years, the last two have been the toughest, with the CUF being a human rights crisis affecting all children and disproportionately affecting children whose rights were already more at risk. More children are in poverty and needing mental health support. The world is changing. Climate justice is now an office priority. Okay. What a fucking douchebag. And then there's another one from him as well, but I thought I'd touch upon quickly. This one is from the 24th of May, where he was at his shit again. Children have waited too long already to have their rights protected in law. Every single day of delay is a day when the rights are not fully protected. You know, and trying to imply that without their rights, they're just in peril, they're in danger. Yeah. God. Are we just going to fucking forget all the generations that came before, including yourself, Bruce? You know, what the fuck did you do? Honest to God. But there's an article here, like, read our response. So here's the response to the Scottish government. It's a fucking joke, man. Absolute joke. It's cringe, it's creepy, the way that this guy talks about this, like, but... Oh, man. I don't know. It's just, even the fucking picture there, though, it fucking... where was it? Aye. Honestly, Children's Parliament as well. And theatres, this fucking everything. I mean, look at the banner photo. Look at the honestly. Children. Admittedly, they're a bit older, but that's not the point. And what are they protesting for this time around, though, in this image? Well, they're protesting for the UNCRC to be enshrined in Scots law. You know, I admittedly thought that was a climate change protest at first glance, but nah, it's no. Children's rights matter. Respect me, and I'll respect you. Children's health, Scotland's wealth. Make children's rights real. And why are they protesting? What gave them the idea to protest? Well, as I said, it's because they're told in school, courtesy of their rights, it's their right to know about their rights, and they're taught that there's not enough being done, and until it's enshrined in the law, they're not protected, etc. And all of a sudden, overnight, they become just like that, activists, politicised, exactly as intended. You know, but see if I can access quickly as well the website. Sorry, I should probably just pause this from my day. Oh yeah, this is what I was talking about regarding these meetings that they have with the government. So they classify it as the cabinet takeovers. So the last one that took place was in March. You can see just by the kids on the screen that I wouldn't even say that they're in double digits in terms of age. And what did they say the key issues were that they wanted to discuss with the government this time around? Well, gender equality in education was the first one. Children's mental health and well-being, and adults realising children's rights. Oh fuck. The Children's Parliament wants the Scottish Government to end gender stereotyping at school, make space for children's mental health and well-being, and campaign for adults to make children's rights real nationwide. Again, this is the self-empowerment coming into effect here. They then start to obtain a bit of an attitude problem, self-entitlement, where they expect adults to kowtow to their demands, and they expect adults to take them seriously. They expect adults to buy into the bullshit that they're being taught and force-fed in school. Adults have to make their rights real nationwide, aka you have to buy into the notion that just because the United Nations have decided that they've created a fucking charter that Bruce Adamson and the SNP have decided to bring into Scotland, we have to play along with this shit, irrespective of whether or not we think it's a bunch of nonsense, which it is by and large. We don't need a charter to determine whether or not a child has a right to play and to an adequate standard of living. And we certainly don't need a charter that seems to be more about prioritising the politicisation of children as opposed to doing anything of benefit. Anyway, And gender equality again, images. What needs to change? Then they start talking about supporting the development of friendships between girls and boys. This is their suggestions to the government. Supporting girls and boys to engage in sport and play that they aren't immediately drawn to. Removing gendered school uniforms. If a girl wants to climb a tree but is wearing a skirt, this may discourage her. By removing gendered uniforms, children can play and express themselves how they want. I mean, just fuck off. And I wonder where these children came up with these ideas from. It's very similar to the feminist shit that they seem to be sneaking in all ages across Scotland. Problem, reaction, solution. And then, if I'm not mistaken, unless they've changed things around, so here's the kids here, 12 years old, 10 years old, so I stand corrected in terms of the double digit thing, but that's not the point. Fucking 12 and 10. Yeah. The call to action I'm taking is there should be training courses on children's rights. Oh, how convenient. How convenient that that's one of the solutions. I'm sure the government listened very intently when that was described. The call to action I'm taking, said the 12-year-old girl. All children should have access to clubs and activities to be able to talk and connect with people. Oh, well, that is great. Fantastic. 11-year-old Rita. The call to action I'm taking is to end gender expectations, e.g. a strong boy and a neat girl. Yeah, of course, we can't have anything that could intentionally or unintentionally lead to a generation of children growing up to be what they're supposed to be. No, we have to fuck it up. Keep those birth rates down for sustainability, after all. The call to action little 10-year-old Michael is taking is there should be a museum of children's rights. Yeah, okay. 11-year-old Wilda. Fun fact, I'm good at sports. Some sports. Oh, that's great. Some sports. Okay. The call to action I'm taking is there should be a big advertising campaign to raise awareness of children's rights. Of course, I'm sure Bolly's when he was slapping that fucking bald head of his with joy when that was described. 11-year-old Sam says that adults should listen to children and treat them fairly. And thank God for the UNCRC and Bruce Adamson, because without their presence, without these children knowing about these concepts, then adults would just be still treating children mercifully and unapologetically, unfairly. And along came Bruce Adamson, the progressive creep, and lo and behold, now we are moving towards a society where children are treated fairly. Finally, fuck. Where was it? 2021's one. Wait, do you see this though? I mean, this one was even more shocking, if not equally. So this was March 2021. Children again. And what did they suggest? What did they say was a vital thing that needed to be discussed? An anti-racist education. Is that so? Very convenient. And if memory serves me correctly, that was before the election. So, oh, you twisted my arm. Oh, you twisted my arm, unclip that. That's a very good idea. I wonder where they came up with that concept. I wonder where they came up with the idea that we needed an anti-racist education to be implemented across society in Scotland. What needs to change? Support children who have experienced racism, define it. Anti-racist education to be shaped by experts, including BAMEs, and they're BAME, therefore they're experts by default. That's very similar to what you would expect a BAME so-called anti-racist to suggest themselves. So the children are coming up with rhetoric that is identical to what you would expect to hear coming from an anti-racist themselves. Isn't that something? To know how to report racism, to learn about racism, the impact of it and how to challenge it, to learn about the achievements and experiences of BAMEs, or lack thereof, to have more BAME teachers in school stuff. Oh, what a shock. What a fucking shock that is one of the suggestions that the children had. They concluded that we needed more brown teachers in Scotland. Very similar rhetoric to what we hear religiously from the likes of Kajita, the big brain, Mohammed. I notice a pattern here. They're introduced to social justice talking points. They're propagandised, they're politicised, and they're encouraged to advocate for it. They're encouraged to become activists, all courtesy of this fucking bill, this charter that's brandished as some saving grace so children know that they can go out safely to play in the garden. Anyway, to conclude, because this video is getting on a bit now, this last thing, this was the actual website from Bruce Adamson's website. I wonder if that video's still there of him. If that, he's just a fucking weirdo. But so this is in reference to John Swinney, who announced that, well, it says here, sorry, the announcement that the government will now address the amendments needed to pass the UNCRC and incorporate it into Scottish law. Bruce Adamson said that today's announcement by the government has been a long time coming for kids. After much delay, it gives some hope that their rights will finally be properly protected in law. That hope must now be followed up with prompt and concrete action. The bill was passed in the Parliament in March 2021 and it should be enforced by now, and it's disappointing that the government has taken nearly 8 months to set out how the Supreme Court's judgment will be taken into account. Every single day of delay is a day when children's rights are not fully protected. And for fuck's sake, we need to act quick and imminent because they are in danger. Clearly, all children will benefit from the protection of the rights being put into law, but it is particularly important for the children whose rights are most at risk. It is even more urgent for Scotland to secure children's rights given the UK government's recent announced plan to weaken the protections in the Human Rights Act. The CUF and the cost of living crisis require human rights-based response, and the law will give children the power to enforce their rights. And we know from countries which have already incorporated children's rights that this has the potential to deliver transformative change. And that's very, very, very overused, but the important to note phrase. Transformative change crops up all too often in discussions pertaining to shit in the sphere. Please tell me I can find this video before I go so I can show you this wet wipe if you've not seen him before. He's a fucking cretin, like. I just don't like him. Don't like him because I don't like anybody that goes out of their way to promote this shit. And there's two types of people, obviously. There's the delusional types that believe the nonsense that they claim to stand for, and Bruce Adamson might very well be somebody that falls into that category, but that's not the point. He's a useful idiot if that's the case. But then there's the malevolent types that know exactly what they're fucking doing. They know exactly why they're pushing this. You know, I'll show you a video of him. 2 seconds. I'll get it up. Like, oh, there it is. There it is.
The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child is the most beautiful legal document in existence.
I mean, just fuck off. Just as most beautiful document in existence. I mean, what the fuck's wrong with him? Like, this is Angus Robertson, top tier Angus Robertson, where you can't even mention the European Union without getting a fucking boner.
It brings together all of the human rights of children and young people into one place. Children have a broad array of human rights, and they've been acknowledged right from the beginning of the development of the human rights system. We've always known that childhood is special, but the UNCRC was the first document to bring all of those obligations, civil, political, economic, social, cultural, and humanitarian law, into one cohesive document. Starting with the idea that every child should grow up in a family environment of happiness, love, and understanding, and then setting out obligations on the state to deliver things that will ensure children thrive. It focuses very heavily on supporting families and on ensuring that those children who require additional support are given that at the earliest opportunity.
Aye. So that's the fluffy, namby-pamby version of events. But beneath the surface, what is very clear is that it is a gateway to propagandising and politicising children, as is self-evident with what you can see at present taking place in Scotland, whether it's protests demanding action on climate change, whether it's protests demanding this is enshrined in law, whether it's action being taken or demands being taken, put forth, to have gender stereotypes eradicated from schools, or anti-racism, etc, etc. You name it, it's been discussed in schools, all up and down the country, courtesy of this fucking bill. A bill that's existed for some time, aye, but it's only ever since it's become a talking point in Scotland, and the suggestions to enshrine it into law have become more and more of a common talking point, that this has seemingly opened the door to politicising children. You know? See, Now, obviously, if I hadn't rambled for 40 odd minutes, I probably would have gone through this website a bit more, but I have done it in the past. But I'm just going to play the first 10-20 seconds of this video, which kind of highlights what I'm talking about in relation to their rights and propagandising, as they say it themselves, from the horse's mouth. Or can I say that when it's about a child? Is that ageist?
Hello, we're members of Children's Parliament from across Scotland who have been involved in Scotland's Climate Assembly. It's the first time children have been involved in the Climate Assembly, which is very exciting. We have the right to have a say, and we also have the right to grow up in a healthy environment, so it's really important children have been involved.
Okay. We have a right to grow up in a healthy environment, and we have a right to be listened to, etc., etc. So it's just open goals, open gates, to begin the propagandising.